They said the Sultan ruled the world, but in the quiet chambers of Topkapi, one woman ruled the Sultan. His name was Suleiman al-Kanuni, the lawgiver. He commanded an empire that stretched from the sands of North Africa to the gates of Vienna. His word was decree, his presence was majesty, and his shadow, death. He was the center of a cosmos built on absolute, unyielding power. Yet every empire, no matter how vast, has its vulnerable seam. And every man, no matter how magnificent, has a heart that can be pierced. The woman who found that seam, who mastered that heart, did not arrive on a golden barge or descend from a royal house. She arrived as property, as cargo. She arrived not as a queen, but as a slave. Her name, given at birth in the small, sun-drenched town of Rohatyn, part of the Ruthenian lands of the Polish kingdom, was likely Anastasia or Alexandra Lizowska. She was a Christian priest's daughter, raised on Slavic folklore and the harsh, beautiful landscape of the Eastern steppe. A life we can imagine of simple certainties. That certainty was shattered in a single, brutal moment. The Tatar raiders moved like a plague wind, swift, merciless. They burned the homes, butchered the men who resisted, and bound the young women for the journey south. Her screams, her terror, her identity, all were stripped away, replaced by the crushing reality of the chain gang. She was just one more piece of human chattel on the route to the slave markets of Kaffa, then across the Black Sea to the most formidable and feared city on earth, Constantinople. She lost her family, her faith, her name. But in that void, something else was forged, a ruthless, incandescent will to survive. She would not be a victim. She would not be silent. She would find the one and only way out of the bottom of the world, by ascending to the very top. She was 19, perhaps 20, when she was ushered through the gate of felicity and into the labyrinthine, suffocating world of the Topkapi Palace. A beautiful girl, yes, but Istanbul was overflowing with beauty. What set her apart was the fierce, terrifying light behind her eyes. A light that betrayed the gruesome historian's truth. She was not merely a conquest. She was a refugee carrying a war within her soul. The Harem, Harem-i-Humayun, the forbidden sanctuary. For most of the world, it was an object of lurid fantasy. For the women, trapped within its gilded walls, it was a state prison disguised as paradise. Imagine walking into that world. The air is thick with the scent of jasmine and silent, crushing ambition. The architecture is stunning. Lapis lazuli tiles, intricate wood carvings, courtyards open only to the sky. But the true language of the harem is silence. Here, every move, every smile, every whispered word was a potential political act. The purpose of the harem was not pleasure, it was dynasty. It was a meticulously engineered breeding ground for future sultans, designed to isolate the monarch from outside influence, ensuring that only the state-trained personnel, the slaves, could touch the future of the Ottoman line. Above all was the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, the absolute authority. Then the Kadinlar, the favorites, and the countless tiers of odalisques, servants and girls waiting for a glance, a promotion, or a grave. Presiding over the entire institution, the one gatekeeper between the women and the outside world, was the Kizlar Arsa, the chief black eunuch, a man whose silence was as powerful as any army general's word. Alexandra, the priest's daughter, was now merely a courier, a chattel. She cried initially, she raged, she stood out, not for her looks, though her striking auburn hair and green eyes were unusual, but for her tumultuous emotional volatility. It was this volatile nature, this capacity for unrestrained emotion, that earned her a new, ironic name. Hürrem. Hürrem. The cheerful one. The laughing one. It was a cruel joke, yet she seized it. If the name meant cheer, she would use that cheer to disarm. She realized quickly that beauty was cheap, but wit was priceless. The other girls were trained to be perfect, silent flowers. They learned the strict choreography of the veil, the bow, the walk, the seduction. They spoke softly, moved gracefully, and died quietly. Hürrem rejected that script. She spent her days not merely practicing embroidery, but listening. She was a sponge. She learned not only the Turkish language, but the cultural codes. She studied the delicate, lethal politics of the court. When she finally learned to read, a startling achievement for a slave, she gained access to the great libraries of the palace. This was her education. The curriculum was history, poetry, and power. She realized the fatal flaw of her competition. They sought to please the Sultan's body. Hürrem understood she needed to captivate his mind. In the harem, everyone was defined by silence and obedience. Hürrem would define herself by conversation and challenge. This was her first, magnificent act of rebellion. She was going to be the noise in the silence. If you are drawn into the dangerous allure of Ottoman history, hit that like button. We have so many more stories of power and betrayal to share. Don't forget to subscribe to the Gruesome Historians for more deep dives into the shadows of the past. Suleiman the Magnificent was no mere hedonist. He was a poet who wrote under the pen name Muhibbi, the lover. He was a scholar who commissioned libraries and debated jurisprudence. He was surrounded by adulation, but starved for intellectual companionship. When Hürrem was finally presented to the Sultan, the moment was not the clumsy, nervous debut of a typical concubine. It was an audience. The historical accounts suggest that while she charmed him with an improvised dance and a dazzling smile, the Hürrem persona, what truly held his attention was what came after. While the other favorites would offer soft submission, Hürrem offered dialogue. When the Sultan asked a question about the day's politics, she did not defer. She offered a witty, slightly provocative opinion. When he spoke of his poetry, she had read it, and she offered a genuine, astute critique. She made the Sultan feel like a man, not a deity. She forced him off the pedestal of absolute power and onto the common ground of shared intellect. The harem was designed to make every woman interchangeable. Hürrem made herself irreplaceable. This bond solidified in the form of letters. Suleiman was often away on campaign, in Hungary, in Persia, in Rhodes. For months at a time, he relied on letters for news, command, and comfort. While tradition demanded formal, subservient missives, Hürrem's letters were vibrant, urgent, and deeply intimate. They were filled with playful banter, expressions of genuine yearning, and subtle counsel on matters of state. She dared to reference his poems, writing, "My life, my lord, my love, my sultan. I cannot hear the beating of my heart. I am lost in your kingdom. I weep and say, the lawgiver is far away." This was the true seduction, not of the flesh, but of the shared world they created in the silence between Constantinople and the battlefield. Suleiman's contemporaries noted his obsession. He wrote more poems to Hürrem than to any other woman in his life combined. She was his confidant, his muse, and his emotional anchor. Within a year, she conceived. The birth of her first son Shehzada Mehmed in 1521 marked her formal elevation. She was no longer just a concubine. She was a mother of a prince, a Haseki, a favorite. But Hürrem was not finished. The system of the harem was designed for rotational love, to prevent any single woman from gaining too much influence. The Sultan was expected to eventually move on, leaving Hürrem to live out her days focused solely on her son. Hürrem had seen the cruelty of this system. She knew the agony of being cast aside. She had secured the Sultan's affection, but she had not secured her future. The clock was ticking, and the stakes were about to turn lethal. For Hürrem to survive, someone else had to fall. That someone was Mahidevran Sultan, the springtime beauty who had been Suleiman's principal favorite and the mother of his eldest son, Shehzade Mustafa. Mustafa was the perfect Ottoman heir, handsome, militarily gifted, and popular with the Janissaries, the elite troops. Mahidevran was the established, elegant, and culturally compliant favorite. Hürrem, the former slave, the cheeky foreigner, was an existential threat. The harem was small, and Topkapi Palace, though vast, became the stage for a psychological war waged with veiled insults, deliberate snubs, and silent maneuvering. The rules of the harem stipulated that once a concubine bore a son, she was not permitted to share the Sultan's bed again, allowing others a chance to conceive and ensuring a balanced field of heirs. This rule was the ultimate leash on a favorite's power. Hürrem shattered it. She refused to be separated from Suleiman. She insisted on his company, his bed, and his ear. This was not merely stubbornness. It was a carefully calculated move to prevent Mahidevran from ever having the Sultan's undivided attention again. The tension culminated in a physical confrontation. Details are hazy, but reports confirm a brutal, ugly fight where Mahidevran physically assaulted Hürrem. Mahidevran, relying on ancient protocol, was outraged by the upstart's audacity. Hürrem, relying on the Sultan's growing dependency, took her injuries directly to Suleiman. The result was swift, political, and devastating. Suleiman removed Mahidevran from his presence and dramatically cut her allowance. Her physical violence became the excuse Hürrem needed to isolate her rival. The message was clear. Hürrem was untouchable, but the slave still bore the title of concubine. She could be discarded. Her children, though princes, lacked the ultimate legal protection. Hürrem demanded the one thing no slave favorite had ever been granted: the nikah, the legal, state-sanctioned marriage. To marry a slave was an act of political and religious heresy. The Sultan could not marry his concubine. It compromised his status, potentially made his children less legitimate, and most importantly, challenged the entire structure of the imperial house, which was built on the Sultan's absolute sexual and marital freedom. The Valide Sultan and the Grand Vizier, Ibrahim Pasha, fought it bitterly. But Hürrem persisted. She played on the Sultan's scholarly piety and his deep, poetic love for her. She made him choose, her or the state of things. In 1533 or 1534, the unprecedented happened. Suleiman, in a ceremony kept largely secret from the public, married Hürrem. The Polish slave was now Hürrem Sultan, the legal, lawful wife of the Padishah. This act was more powerful than any battle won. It elevated her children above Mahidevran's son, Mustafa, by giving them an imperial mother. It gave Hürrem an institutional power base. It was a victory of personality over tradition, of wit over protocol. The cheerful slave had become a political weapon of mass destruction. Hürrem had defeated Mahidevran, but her greatest enemy was not a woman, it was a man. Ibrahim Pasha, the Grand Vizier, Suleiman's closest friend, a Greek slave himself, who had risen higher than anyone thought possible, a man who was, in all but name, the co-ruler of the empire. Ibrahim was arrogant, brilliant, and saw Hürrem as a dangerous distraction, a foreign woman poisoning the well of imperial politics. He openly insulted her, referring to her as an interloper. This was the deadliest conflict. Mahidevran fought for love. Ibrahim fought for power itself. Hürrem was patient. She knew that to defeat Ibrahim, she couldn't simply whisper. She needed to lay a foundation of concrete, undeniable political doubt in the mind of the emperor, a seed that would blossom only with time. Ibrahim's ambition provided the fertile ground. He began styling himself with titles that verged on treason. Saraska Sultan, Commander-in-Chief Sultan. He even minted his own coins in a conquered territory. Hürrem and her nascent political faction, which included her future son-in-law, Rustem Pasha, began the slow, careful process of collecting evidence and framing incidents. She didn't have to lie about his arrogance. She only had to ensure the Sultan heard about it at the right, most vulnerable time. Suleiman was torn. Ibrahim was his friend, his brother, the co-architect of his greatest victories. But the Ottoman state rested on a terrible, ironclad rule. The Sultan's person must be inviolable. No one, not even a friend, could be allowed to rival his majesty. In a state built on law and order, Hürrem was arguing that the lawgiver himself was being undermined. In 1536, the drama reached its gruesome climax. Suleiman, trapped by his own laws and Hürrem's meticulous case, wrestled with his conscience. He had previously sworn to Ibrahim that he would not kill him while he slept. So, Suleiman ensured the contract was broken. He spent 7 sleepless nights, dining with Ibrahim before ensuring the vizier was asleep in the adjacent chamber. Then, he had the Janissaries enter. In the pre-dawn darkness, Ibrahim Pasha was strangled in his bed within Topkapi Palace. The next morning, his body was found, and the populace, stunned, saw only the sudden cold face of the state. The slave had removed the greatest man in the empire, save one. The move proved her power, her intelligence, and her utter ruthlessness. It showed that she was willing to sacrifice the Sultan's happiness and comfort to secure her family's future. If you are mesmerized by the dark, psychological games played in Topkapi, we appreciate you taking a moment to share this story with another history aficionado. Let's keep these forgotten histories alive. The remainder of Hürrem's life was spent not in the harem, but as the first true queen of the Ottoman Empire. She transitioned from the secluded palace to the old palace, exercising power openly. She wrote to foreign monarchs, influenced appointments, and engaged in massive beneficial charity work, building mosques, hospitals, and soup kitchens. She was a diplomatic power in her own right. She had secured her throne, but the gruesome historian knows that power always demands a final, terrifying payment. Her great opponent, Mahidevran's son, Shehzade Mustafa, was still the most popular and viable heir. Hürrem had several sons of her own, and the Ottoman tradition of fratricide meant that when Suleiman died, all but one would have to perish. Hürrem, knowing that Mustafa was a threat to her children's very existence, continued her campaign, using Rustem Pasha to further sow the seeds of sedition against the heir. She convinced Suleiman that Mustafa was planning a coup against his aging father. The result was the execution of Mustafa in 1553, strangled by the Sultan's silent executioners while the heartbroken Suleiman watched from behind a curtain. Hürrem had won the ultimate political victory. Her love for Suleiman remained, a dark, passionate, and real devotion documented in their surviving letters. Yet, it was a devotion forged in the fire of necessary betrayal. She died in 1558, at the age of 53, a legal sultan. She lies buried with Suleiman in the Suleymaniye Mosque complex. Roxelana, the cheerful slave, taught the Ottoman Empire that a woman's true power lies not in her beauty, but in her mind. She showed that a prisoner can become a politician, and a concubine, a queen. But her story is a psychological drama, a haunting reminder that in a world ruled by men and violence, the ultimate weapon is the ability to love, not just a man, but the power he wields, even if that love requires the sacrifice of every noble sentiment. She enchanted an empire, yes, but she did so by transforming a profound, soulful bond into the deadliest political lever in the entire Ottoman world. What do you think? Was Hürrem Sultan a brilliant political mastermind or a tragic figure forced to commit atrocities to survive? Let us know in the comments below. And until next time, this is the Gruesome Historians, reminding you that history is rarely kind, but always captivating.